Hello again and welcome to Forum for a Better Understanding, or I should say the third version of Forum for a Better Understanding. You know, there was a second version and it played on CBS on our local Channel 47, and it was an effort to talk about religious topics with an interfaith panel. But the original Forum for a Better Understanding goes back to 1937 to 1954, when three very distinguished men had a radio program on KMJ called Forum for a Better Understanding. It was Rabbi Greenberg, Dean Malloch, and Monsignor Dowling. And these three men shared week after week. And today we're going to resurrect that program by having three representatives from those faiths be here on a panel. They have not been panelists together, and the other people lasted 18 years. So I don't know that we'll be here in 18 years with this distinguished panel of ours. To my left is Rabbi Rick Winer, whom you know was here last week, has been here other times, representing Temple Beth Israel, and is a successor to Rabbi David Greenberg. And in the middle of our group here is Reverend Michele Racusin, who is the priest and the pastor of Holy Family Episcopal Church here in Fresno. And directly across from me is my good friend, Father David Norris, who is the sacramental priest at our local parish of St. Paul Newman Center here in town. As we begin, could we begin with maybe an opening thought from each one of you about the importance that you see at this time in your ministry that there be a program like Forum for a Better Understanding now, just as there must have been back in 1937, the need for a program that interfaith people would actually share what connects them and what divides them. Because the rabbi and the monsignor and the dean did disagree, and they definitely had their ground to cover. Rabbi, could you begin?
The world today and media today seems to be so fascinated with differences and what tears people apart. The legacy of Forum for a Better Understanding is the effort to bring people together, which I think is absolutely a worthwhile endeavor, and I'm thrilled to be a part of this honorable legacy.
I am so glad that Rabbi Winer, who has only been here briefly since July, no, or something?
Yeah, July.
It's been not a year, and yet he's been on the program and has made a commitment to interfaith dialogue immediately. There's been a constant effort of the rabbi and Temple Beth Israel to stay in the forefront of dialogue in the town here. Michele, could you reintroduce yourself? We had a program called Breaking the Stained Glass Ceiling, and it was really great to be able to talk with you and Susie about the difficulty of being, or the challenge of being a priest who is a female, and to be able to lead a congregation when so many are saying, not in my church. Could you please speak to the importance of dialogue, Michele?
Well, first of all, it was difficult to become ordained in this diocese as a woman, and then to become the rector of a parish was yet another monumental step. And a lot of that is, I think, is the result of fear. It's fear of the unknown. You know, how different is a woman going to be? You know, we're so used to having men priests, men church leaders, and how does that difference play out in the world? And so I think that the interfaith dialogue is really important because it's so easy to become insular. And we can hear about differences, but we need to get out and really understand, to put flesh on the otherness of people and to understand what they're all about.
Thank you very much for being here again. It's been a while. We hope to have you back again.
My pleasure.
Father David, it's always a joy. You did a three-part series with us on the Vatican Council on the Vision program that people are still talking about. Thank you very much. Could you share with us how you as a priest have always been committed to this, and why you know that it's as important now as when you were a young priest back in the day?
Yes, well, I think the Second Vatican Council really opened up this whole process of dialogue and really encouraged that And I think it's more important today than ever. When we were talking in those programs about the Second Vatican Council, that was a breakthrough at that time, and in this 50th anniversary year of the opening of that council, it's still really edgy in many areas, especially in the popular media, to do anything that encourages dialogue and better understanding among various diversity. It seems, as Rabbi said, that people are more interested in promoting differences and creating conflicts, even where there are no conflicts. So I believe that it's very important to continue that work, and I've been blessed over the years, both back at my home state of Rhode Island and since I moved to California, to be involved in ecumenical and interfaith programs, and I've always found it enriching for me personally, and also a very valuable experience for the church.
And you've even been director of the ecumenical effort of the diocese, so thank you for those years of being committed and to keep up that commitment in so many ways. There's a way to project ecumenism and interfaith that isn't even being on a panel. It's just the way one relates with their connections to other religions and other faiths. I want to thank our panel for what they've done and what they're going to keep doing. But let's go backwards now. Rabbi, can you introduce us a little bit to the greatness of Rabbi David Greenberg? Because you did bring up the idea, we should do a show, Jim, about Greenberg and Malloch and Dowling. Tell us why you like Rabbi and why you are succeeding in his own congregation.
When I first came to town and started learning about the legacy of this congregation, it was quite clear that Rabbi Greenberg was revolutionary in stepping forward into interfaith dialogue, and not just a locally small time, but the radio program became quite big, and I think at one point was aired nationally. It's wonderful that right here in Fresno they've been memorialized in this statue downtown, right in Courthouse Park. Of the three of them, Forum for Better Understanding, I think the statue by Clement Renzi is known as Brotherhood of Man. The sculptor was friends of the three, and it's such a beautiful representation of what they created together. I don't know that our community really has a continuing consciousness of what that statue right there downtown means, and how we can and should be keeping that legacy alive.
Now, one way you keep it alive is right outside your office, that everyone going to Temple Beth Israel is going to see it. Tell us how important it is for the congregation that you lead to be aware of their roots and the greatness of a rabbi who served them 40 years as their leader.
His leadership was inspirational, clearly, and that legacy of bringing people together and getting out into the community. It's really easy, as we said, to be insular and just to worry about your own. But the depth of my tradition teaches me that it's not just about who we are, it's about taking who we are into the greater community and using it to partner together on deep levels of understanding with our neighbors in the work that we do to make the community and the greater world community a better place.
People may not know, but Rabbi was very committed to working with Catholics. He was really big into that. Was a chaplain at St. Agnes Medical Center. But beyond that, which would be like, easy compared to the other thing he did, he worked a lot with migrant workers and was committed definitely to medical facilities, social services for the migrants. And that's why it is so exciting to know that the school named for him, tell us about that school and how it reflects the very goals of the life of Rabbi David.
As far as I can tell, there is not another school in the country that's named for a public school that's named for a rabbi. It's in an area that is not the highest socioeconomic, and they're in constant need of people helping out. And so to have his memory there on the school is not only a great honor, but to me it's it's a mission that we need to continue to honor his service by honoring not just the community, but particularly the students of that school. I'm hoping to put together a project to help supply the needier kids of the school, as well as the teachers, with supplies. We've already started talking about how we can do this for several schools in the area, and hoping that together we can guilt other religious organizations into doing likewise.
Guilt is not just a Catholic thing. You heard the rabbi mention it. It's across the religious boards, and it's sometimes a healthy thing. One thing about that school in particular, it's got a 51% Latino population, 43% East Asian, and 5% African American, which seems to reflect this passion of Rabbi David Greenberg to be serving the bigger community. This is not a school up in North Fresno. This is not where the temple is. It's where people need help. So thank you, Rabbi, for following the lead of great Rabbi Greenberg. We're going to come back to Rabbi later, both rabbis, but right now let's go to Reverend Racusin to talk to us a little bit about the Episcopal Church. Why don't you tell us a little bit, Michele, about the diocese, about your position at Holy Family, and maybe connect us backwards to the great Dean Malloch.
Okay. Well, I am currently the rector in the Episcopal Church in Fresno, the first female rector in our diocese. Our diocese is one that is very inclusive and very welcoming of all kinds of ecumenical projects. In fact, we are getting ready to do the backpack project together to benefit Pinedale School, which is the school that's needy in the Pinedale area, as well as the Jewish Community School, or the school that was named after the Jewish rabbi. Dean Malloch was an icon at the Episcopal Cathedral in Fresno and served there for almost 2 decades. And one of his passions, the legacy he left behind, was his zeal for education. He was not only a professor in our seminary in Berkeley, but he took that passion here to Fresno. And he spent a lot of time promoting education via publications and speeches, and really trying to instill in our youth how vital it is to obtain an education. And of course, that is something that is necessary as a forum for better understanding. You've got to be educated and understand what's going on in the world around you.
One thing we have to do right now is take our break. But believe it or not, Father David, who is patiently waiting his turn like a good Catholic priest, he will be back up right away, and we'll talk not only about the original forum, but we have 3 topics that we think right now we'd like our 3 panelists to share about, not necessarily agreeing on everything, but we're going to talk about 3 important topics. Stay tuned.
KNXT thanks all its loyal viewers and respected businesses who have supported your Catholic television station. Now you can support KNXT with program underwriting by having your name, your company's name, or organization associated with your favorite program. Detailed information about you or your company will appear before and after each program or day part you select. Keep the quality and spiritual message alive and make a difference. Call 559-488-7440 today, or go online at knxt.tv to find out more about program underwriting on KNXT.
Welcome back to Forum for a Better Understanding. As you may remember, a minute ago we were here trying to talk about the roots of this program, and we're very proud of them. They go back to 1937 on KMJ. They go back to when Monsignor Jim Peterson, had a wonderful program on CBS, the local station, in which weekly he would be guiding a discussion. And that we are trying in our best way for the last 9 years to bring up hundreds of local guests, one of them being Father David Norris. Father David, could you share, as you would like, the idea of the Catholic commitment to such projects as ecumenism, interfaith, and the importance that that program had back in the day, and why this program has its relevance still now?
Well, I don't know too much about Monsignor Dowling, who was the Catholic participant in that, but I assume, just from knowing his connections with the other gentleman that he was ahead of his time from the point of view of the Catholic Church. It really wasn't until the Second Vatican Council that the Church as a whole around the world was really encouraged to be involved directly in ecumenical programs, dialogue, conversations. There were certainly elements of it, even from the beginning of the 20th century, with the foundation of the Franciscan Friars of the Atonement and a religious community that still exists in Graymoor, New York, and is really behind the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity, and has been involved in that for over 100 years. But that was not at the center of the Church's consciousness until the Ecumenical Council of the Vatican was called in the 1960s. So I think that that project is ongoing and is very much necessary. And I would just plug in myself there with the program that was locally televised that Monsignor Peterson was on. I did that for a brief time before it was canceled on the air, but it was on, I think it was broadcast at 5:30 or 5 a.m. on Sunday mornings. So I'm not sure how many people, including myself, would be up at that hour to watch it. But it was a very good experience with Rabbi Siegel, one of the predecessors at Temple Beth Israel. And I think we had a variety of different clergy from other Christian churches also that participated over the years.
One thing to make a plug for the great Monsignor Dowling is to just say something. He predates all this great progress that the Church made. To think that he came from Ireland, he was ordained in 31, like many of those wonderful priests that came over from Dublin, from Maynooth Seminary, came to Fresno in 1938 when it was Monterey Fresno Diocese. In 1940, he was named pastor of St. Therese, where he was pastor for the next 28 years till he died, a young man of 61. But to think that at that time, under Bishops Schur, Willinger, and Manning, that there was this breath of fresh air among the three of those clergymen during the war, after the war, in the Cold War. It's just amazing that that could have happened, and we want to give them credit. Now let's break new ground among ourselves and throw out a topic and wonder where it goes. Rabbi, could you be the first to talk about the idea of, in your community, at a temple, at a synagogue, the importance of the congregation, what we would call in our parlance the laity, the non-ordained, the non-rabbi. How is it that the congregation, how important is it, the voice of the non-ordained? How is it in your church, in your religious center, in your church, in our parish?
So there at the synagogue, different perhaps than many church organizations, the laity is in charge. I am there to help serve them, but they run the show. So their importance is paramount in congregational life. The rabbi is trained as a learned member of the community, and technically there's nothing that I do that they can't do. So I may have more training and more knowledge in certain areas, but as we've had members of the synagogue here on the program, they know a lot. They know what they're doing. I just have a little more practice.
What a nice, disarming way to say that. Thank you very much. It's very, I'll tell you why I like that one. Michele, yeah. How is it in the Episcopal tradition?
Well, you know, in the last 50 years or so, the Church has really embraced the ministry of the laity. And they've become much more engaged in our church services and in ministries. For example, lay people now are really wonderful lectors, so they read the scriptures. They can be trained and licensed to serve at the altar and distribute the sacrament, the wine. They are the ones who bring up the offerings to the altar, the bread and wine, instead of having it up at the altar already. And so there are many ways that they are fully engaged. And also the baptismal covenant is something that's now done in a community setting. Baptisms used to be private affairs, and now they are done principally at the Easter Vigil, which brings back a lot of our early church history. And the congregation is there to receive them and to encourage them. And at the same time, they renew their own baptismal covenant every single time we have a baptism. So there's a lot more engagement. And they're encouraged to go out and have ministries and to serve in the community and to bring the faith out. And so they've really been a lot more engaged in the last 50 years or so.
I guess there's a lot of echo there.
I was going to say it sounds very familiar because it's almost parallel in the Roman Catholic Church that it's in the last 50 years that the laity have become much more rediscovering what was at the roots of the Christian community in the New Testament. It's not something that was new, but as we study the history of the growth of the church, during the Middle Ages, the Roman Catholic Church became highly clericalized, and a lot of the New Testament model of church as body of Christ, with everyone through baptism taking their role, that was lost. It's been rediscovered and re-emphasized, and I always jump in to say it wasn't just rediscovered because of the lower number of ordained priests now. When the Vatican Council renewed the church in this way, we were not as yet experiencing, so I really see that as a movement of the Holy Spirit that was helping us to grow for the future needs of that faith community, with the restoration of the permanent diaconate, ordained ministry, but also the empowerment really of lay people in the church, which has become essential in any parish community nowadays, especially.
A second topic that we wanted to get into, and we'll come back to this idea of the congregation being the motor at the temple. I'm very impressed with that thought, because it is so foreign. It's so interesting to see that that's exactly how you see yourself, just being sort of like having this body that's there and you serve a function. That is really awesome. Another topic that's awesome is liturgical reform. All of us go through it in certain parts. I think right now we're going to find out that recently all three of our panelists have been involved very seriously in reform of their prayer life for their congregations. Could you begin, Rabbi?
In the last few years, the Reform movement of Judaism has introduced a new prayer book. And what's actually important to Reform Judaism is it is not the prayer book. It is not the authorized prayer book. We don't do that. It's one that we have, and it's there, and most people are using it, but we do not authorize one because we don't believe in doing it that way. There is, with the concept of liturgical reform, there isn't one authoritative liturgy in book form. In my lifetime, I've seen three different major prayer books: the Old Union Prayer Book, Gates of Prayer in 1975, and then Mishkan Tefillah. The new one came out about 5-6 years ago. It's significantly different, and yet if I want to make it seem the same as it's been for 100 years, it can come out pretty much the same, but it gives me license to have more variety of the feel of what we have in the service. What I think actually for me and my congregants is more significant is less the words on the page than the music that goes behind it. So much of what we do is in the music, and contemporary liturgical settings have really brought significant life to the prayer experience.
Michele, what's going on with Episcopal prayer?
Well, our prayer book was revised in 1979. And so those of us who have been around for a long time are still referring it as the new prayer book. But it's been a while. And that prayer book really endeavored to use the scholastic tools, the new research, and go back to what was happening more in the first century. So for example, we confess our sins and then we pass the peace. And so the movement of the passing of the peace is now after the confession rather than after the communion. And it's not just a statement that's made. The people in the pews or in the chairs actually go and engage one another and say, "May the peace of the Lord be with you." My sins are forgiven, I forgive you. Are we copacetic now, kind of thing. And so that's been an important movement. The language has changed too. You know, the 79 prayer book moved from Elizabethan English, the Tudor style English, but we couldn't do it all the way because we needed a compromise. So we have two rites that are parallel, side by side, one with the Old English and one with what was modern English in 1979. But we've now also moved forward because some of that modern English isn't gender neutral. And so we have some, an authorized supplement that is trying to be more inclusive with the language. And so with our prayers, that's kind of the direction that we're moving right now.
Father David, we've made major rewrites.
Right. In the last few months, beginning at the end of November in 2011, we started using the new third edition of the Roman Missal after 40 years of using the Vatican II translations that were done right after the Council into English. We had a major revision in the English form of it. It's a little more flowery. It's an attempt to be more poetic, I think, and also more theological in some of the usage of the language. I've noticed in praying it that it is more, in some ways, it is more inclusive language because they are using humanity now rather than man, and some of the translations of prayers and so on. But I think it reflects a desire to make the ritual more formal and more reverential, and better to enable people to pray. And so far, we're all just getting used to it, as we have to stare at the book more regularly now to get the new words and verbiage.
Absolutely. I'm still on my little prayer card, which is good because otherwise it would be not good. What I'd like to do, we only have like 30 seconds left, so you get 20 seconds each. Rabbi, what about women in Reform Judaism? Give us a placement where they are, and then Michele, and then David, and then we're done.
I'm married to a rabbi.
That says a lot right there. Michele?
Gosh, we've gone from having women polish silver and teach only to be ordained, and we have our presiding bishop, who is the primate, is a woman, and the only one in the Anglican Communion. It's representing the United States.
Father David, where are we?
Good, and we're still not moving too fast on that, as most things move very slowly in the Catholic Church especially, but we are dialoguing.
And I wanted to close on something like that to let you know these are the things that also have to be talked about on a forum. We may only do it saying, 20 seconds, Jim, that's a joke. No, it brought up a point. Rabbi's married to a rabbi, Michelle's a priest, and Father David is knowing we're working in another sort of theater. So what I want us to do is keep praying and working on a forum to see if these topics can be discussed at greater depth next time. Till then, God bless.